All right, well, I wanted to do an update on the John Deere 317. It's been a long while since I made a video on it. I believe I've only made one video on it, and that's been years ago. And it's kind of been put on the back burner a little bit as far as, doing things with it and all. I used it, obviously for a while after I made that video. Well, for a right good little while, off and on. I let my dad borrow it for a while to cut his grass, and he was using it, and he parked it, and it was running fine and everything, and he parked it in the shed one day, and went back out there. The next time we went out there to crank it up, it wouldn't make a sound, or it wouldn't even wheel over. In other words, it's like, the electrical system had, it was almost like basically when you don't, one of the safety interlocks that prevents you from starting it, like when the PTO is engaged or it's not in neutral or something of that nature, was tripped, because when that happens, the starter won't even make a sound. It won't even wheel over. So that's basically what had happened. And so it sat for a while, after that, and in the shed. And, other projects kind of came about and stuff, and I didn't really get around to looking into it. And it sat there, in the shed for a while. So, it was about, I reckon it was about April or May of last year, attempted to start, troubleshooting it and find out what exactly was going on, see what I could do about it. I'm not a full-fledged mechanic by any means. I did the basic stuff that I knew to do, or, read about doing. And so when I first started messing with it again, by that point in time, I had to get a new battery for it. So I went and got a new battery for it, because the other one had, it was older anyway when the machine was parked, and it had basically gotten to the point where it wouldn't hold a charge anymore, even with the battery charger on it. So I got a new battery, turned the key, it still wouldn't make a sound, basically doing the same thing it was doing when parked it. And I got to, messing around with it and all, and, I was kind of checking all my switch positions and everything, and PTO switch was in the off position. However, upon me kind of jiggling the switch around and moving it back and forth, that kind of thing, I finally got the tractor to wheel over. At that point, the starter started working, and it wheeled over. And it wheeled over fine, but it would never hit. In other words, it would never fire. So I started addressing, the ignition components, things like that. I replaced the coil, the condenser, the points, the plug wires, the plugs, did all that. Still nothing. It still would not fire. And then I took the carburetor apart. Before I took the carburetor apart, I made sure there was fuel getting to the carburetor, and the fuel pump was working. The fuel was being delivered to the carburetor just fine. And so, that wasn't the issue. So then I took the carburetor apart, cleaned it, put it back together. Still nothing. And, it would just wheel over. It wouldn't fire or anything like that. And so basically, I tried putting fuel in the carburetor, a little bit through the venturi of the carburetor. It wouldn't fire. And basically, come to find out, long story short, that it was not getting any spark, after replacing all of the components and everything in the ignition that I could, naturally get to on the external parts of the motor and everything. And so, so it sat a little while longer, until I could, I knew I was gonna have to get a friend of mine that is a mechanic was real knowledgeable about things. I go to him whenever I get stumped on something, or if it's just more than what I have the time or resources or tools to handle. And I took it to him about a week ago, and he had it for a couple of days. I mean, it was less than a week he had it. And he called me up and he told me that he had determined that the PTO switch had shorted out the electrical system. Evidently, you know, the PTO switch had went bad, and it had somehow shorted out some of the wiring in the tractor. And that's somehow or another, by doing that, it had prevented it, you know, it wasn't getting spark. Well, at that point, he had traced that out, you know, and determined it wasn't getting spark. He got it to where it was making good spark again. And, you know, he was going to have to naturally get a new PTO switch for it and do some rewiring on the tractor where some of the wiring was damaged. So he did all that, and it ran again. You know, he got it started. Like I said, he got it back to me. It was about 3 or 4 days, I reckon, he had it. And I mean, it runs just like it always did. It runs like it was brand new. So I'm really happy about that, you know. And like I said, he fixed the wiring, did the rewiring that was on the damaged wires, and new PTO switch. And while he had it there, he put some tubes in the front tires for me. The front tires, where it had sat in the shed, they're not the original front turf tires that came on this machine. They're actually the second set of tires, from the factory ones. The factory ones wore out when my granddad had it when I was a kid, and he replaced them with these turf tires here. And anyway, though, where it had sat in the shed, you know, the front tires had lost air and went flat, and where they had sat flat, it kind of creased them. Then some dry rot set in, and so they wouldn't hold air more than 5 minutes. So because of that, you know, my mechanic friend, you know, he was having to work with it and everything. He said, I'm just gonna stick some tubes in here so, you know, you don't have to deal with that headache, so he can move it around his shop and stuff easier. The back tires are still the original Carlisle Turf Chiefs that came on it. Still got good tread on them. They're dry rotted too somewhat, but they hold air right much better. So I didn't have to worry about putting any tubes in those. But anyway, yeah, long story short, it's back and it's running. He pressure washed it at his shop a little bit. You know, it's been real cold lately, so naturally, you know, didn't do like a major, you know, wash on it or anything like that. And I haven't actually put any water on it since I've gotten it back, because it's been getting so cold and freezing around here lately. So I'm gonna probably wait till, you know, the weather warms up before I do, you know, a full degreasing and stuff on it. But I mean, it looks pretty good right now, the way it is, you know, for what cleaning has been done on it. But I'm just happy to have it back running. I did everything I knew to do to it, and you know, it just didn't seem, I mean, naturally it didn't fix it. It didn't get it started. I will say this though, that replacing all those ignition components and whatnot, since I've gotten it back, it starts up the quickest that I've ever known it to. I mean, it just like, you just literally just bump the starter. I mean, that's on a cold start, which is really kind of surprising, because usually on a cold start, and especially this time of year when it's below freezing and stuff like that, it usually would take you, you know, wheeling it over a little bit with the choke on, you know, to get it to fire and everything. I mean, not an excessive amount, but, you know, just kind of pretty typical for an older carbureted engine, I'd say. But now man, I mean, it fires up almost like it's fuel injected. I mean, it naturally, you know, it may pop and spit a little bit, you know, when you first start it up until it warms up and smooths out a little bit. But it's doing great though. I'm really pleased, really glad to have it back and running and all. The side panels for the engine are off right now. I've got those. I just haven't put them back on yet. Left those off where I was working on it, and then I took it to the mechanic, and I knew he would need them off anyway, so I didn't even bother putting them back on there. So I just haven't put them back on. Partly too, I'm planning to kind of clean up the engine a little further too before I reinstall them, so it'll be easier with them off. But I'm thinking here in the next day or two, I'm gonna do a fresh oil change on it. The oil that was in it when it was parked was actually clean, and it still looks clean. But I know the oil's got age on it, even where it sat. So I'm gonna do a fresh oil change on it in the next day or two here, and just for peace of mind, you know, it's not that hard to do. It doesn't take much oil. But talking about the tires, I want to do a tire upgrade on it at some point, you know, but for right now, I'm gonna roll with what it's got, you know. I'm hoping to do some ag tires in the back, definitely, for better traction on it. And possibly at some point down the road, I don't know how soon that will be, I would like to repaint the tractor, the whole thing, you know, frame and body panels and wheels and all that deck. But again, for right now, I'm probably just gonna, you know, just roll with it like it is for a while longer. I get the money and stuff together to kind of in time to take on that project and everything. And it's too cold right now to be doing that anyway. It's, you know, to be trying to paint stuff. Paint just doesn't want to set up good in cold temperatures like this if you don't have some kind of climate controlled shop to cure things in, you know. And then too, you know, it's really damp right now. We've been getting a lot of rain and some frozen precipitation that, you know, melts quickly, you know, and stuff, but definitely a lot of rain. So it's been staying really damp, and that's not good conditions for painting in anyway, with high humidity and dampness. But you know, if you've watched the other video I did about the 317, you'll know that this was my granddad's tractor. He bought it new, excuse me, and what I believe he bought it in 1980. He used it for mowing, but he also used it a lot more for hauling firewood. And he specifically bought it with the smallest mower deck that you could get on the 317 then, which for him, he did it for the reason being of he wanted to be able to get into tighter spaces with it, you know, and stuff, and he didn't want a really big mower deck hanging out on each side, you know. He had a lot of stuff in his yard and things to trim up around at the time, you know, so that was part of the reason why he bought it with a smaller deck on it. This is the I believe it's the 41 rotary mower that John Deere offered for these, and it's got 3 blades and all, but it's relatively small deck, but it cuts you know, it'll cut thick grass with ease. I'm not gonna say it's the smoothest cut out there. I mean, the D140 that we have actually would cut smoother than this, I'd say. this one has a tendency, you know, on more unlevel surfaces, you know, like a heel or something, to scalp, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm not really worried about stuff like that. I mean, you know, because I don't, I'm not a grass fanatic, you know, and also, I mean, it's, you know, it's an older machine. I use it for other things other than mowing, obviously. And so I'm not really, you know, I don't really let that bother me a whole lot. But, you know, if you're cutting something really wide open area and it's really tall and thick, this is your go-to machine right here. I mean, it'll flat out slay some tall grass. I mean, it's almost like a tractor with a bush hog on it. You know, it's just got the torque and power to cut through it. But anyway, and like I said, he bought it and used it, like I said, mainly for hauling firewood and other tasks around his property and stuff like that. And he always kept it, you know, in a garage. It was always garage kept. So for it to be the age it is, I think it looks pretty good. In fact, I tell you, most of the rust that you can see, like on top of the mower deck and some other places on it, spots of rust, I really only think they are there, and they probably wouldn't be there now if it weren't for, he had a problem with a battery on it that started leaking acid. And before he, you know, was able to get it out of there, naturally it spilled. And it spilled, you know, down, you know, on the battery tray, and then leaked down onto the mower deck there. And, you know, that naturally ate away at the paint. And he was older and everything, so he never got around to, you know, repainting it or anything like that due to health reasons and things. But anyway, that's really, I attribute where, you know, the rust that is on it came from is due to the battery acid, unfortunately. I think if it weren't for that, it probably wouldn't have a bit of rust on it. So everything on it, all the paint's original, as I stated before, you know, in the other video I did on it years ago. And this tractor has a lot of sentimental value and a lot of childhood memories for me as a kid, of riding with him on it when I was really young, and then as I got old enough to drive it, me driving it as well. And it's you know, for that reason alone, I mean, you know, a lot of people, when, you know, this last time when it quit running, a lot of people would have, you know, been tempted to have said, well, you know, I'm just gonna sell it. And I guess that's kind of the easy way out of it, you know, when something starts giving you problems like that. But because of the sentimental value that it has to me and all the childhood memories, you know, I couldn't sell this. I mean, it reminds me so much of my granddad and stuff like that. I mean, you know, I can sit right here now and picture him sitting on it, you know, and you know, it holds a special place in my heart, you know, for him, you know, because I was really close to him and all. So like I said, I just, you know, I would not bring myself to sell it, you know. This is the Kohler KT 17QS engine in it. It's a Series 2. You know, these engines, the Series 1 got a bad rap due to the lubrication issues and stuff. Particularly, you know, when they get on a hill, you know, they didn't have the pressurized lubrication, and it would starve for oil, and, you know, the engines would lock up and stuff like that. And unfortunately, these tractors got a bad rap, you know, due to that. And by the time Kohler, you know, corrected the problem with the Series 2, you know, it was too late. You know, this particular model, John Deere, the 317, had gotten a bad reputation. Some of them were outfitted with the Onan engine, which was a good engine. Again, you know, this tractor had kind of a short life in John Deere's history. I believe they started in 79 with this model, and I think it ended in 83, if I'm not mistaken. So it was not, definitely didn't last as long due to that reason as the other models like the 318 and some of their other models they had that lasted into the early 90s. Which is a shame, you know. I mean, because really this Series 2 Kohler is a really good engine, you know. It's really strong, and they run good, you know, if they're tuned properly, and you keep the oil changed in them regularly and make sure the oil stays full. You know, you really don't have any problems out of them. And they sound really good. I mean, the horizontally opposed twin engines are, you know, they've just got a sound all their own. It actually makes them sound like more than a twin cylinder, really. It sounds like you got way more engine up under the hood than what it is, you know, way more cylinders. I always have said with this tractor here, when it comes under load, you know, like you're mowing, or you're climbing a hill or something like that, or pulling a heavy load, you know, and that governor opens up, it's got a real throaty, big tractor sound, I'd call it, you know, like that. And it's another part of what makes me like it a whole lot, you know, along with it just being a well-built, heavy-duty machine. It just has a really good, unique sound. And it's a shame they don't make these horizontally opposed twins anymore, but the government, EPA, gets involved in it, and these engines, these horizontally opposed twins, couldn't meet emissions standards, and they, I guess, more or less got banned. You know, it's that way with any engine. If it can't meet what the government wants it to meet, you know, they put the brakes on that, on production of one. So most now everything's V-twins that you find. And V-twins, I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with them. I mean, they sound good too, but they clearly have a totally different sound. And torque characteristics are very different between the horizontally opposed twin and the V-twins. Me personally, from my experience, you know, and the mechanic, a friend of mine, we were talking about that too, that these engines right here, while, you know, like this engine is rated at 17 horsepower, the torque, the feel of the torque, seat of the pants feel when you're using this machine, or a machine, any of them with the horizontally opposed twin engines, is far greater from a seat of the pants feel than any of the V-twins that we've been on, you know, even present day. It's a lot easier or more common for V-twins now to have way more horsepower than this. I mean, you know, most of them now are 20 or better, 20, 25, 27, sometimes even more than that. I mean, you know, on the V-twins. So they definitely put out the horsepower, but their torque curves, I think, are very different. And these are just, these horizontally opposed twins are just very torquey motors, and in a very different way. So, yeah, like I said, you know, I want to do more to it, but I mean, I'd like to get a new seat for it. I mean, it's the original seat. It's got a John Deere seat cover on it that I put on it years ago. The factory seat had a tear on each side right here. Other than that, I reckon the factory seat was in pretty good shape, a little bit faded. But I bought that seat cover from John Deere, that vinyl seat cover, as just a budget-friendly option at the time, because I priced the seat for it, and it was outrageous. I mean, I couldn't, you know, at the time afford to put a whole new seat on it. But even, you know, despite all that, it being the original seat, and and all. It actually still really comfortable to sit in, so I can't complain about that. This machine naturally was not equipped with a hour meter, so can't really say exactly how many hours are on it. You can see it's got all the engine tins in place. Still got the original air cleaner canister and air duct hose from the flywheel fan on it. That's a common thing I see on a lot of them now that are missing that hose right there. That's the original hose on this one, believe it or not. It's held up, I hadn't even dry rotted or anything, but it's missing on a lot of them. You know, a lot of people, and you'll just have that, this will be open here, and I mean, I suppose, you know, if you, it obviously will work without it, but you know, I think they designed it that way to kind of feed cooler air into the air cleaner, so that when the hood and side panels were shut on it, that it wasn't just sucking in hot engine heat into the carburetor, which, you know, would kind of kill your power. So I guess it's kind of a old school cold air intake, or ram air intake, if you want to call it that, because the fan actually forces air into it. You know, your flywheel fan is right back in here. Moves quite a bit of air to cool the engine, and it also, you know, ducts the air through that hose to the air cleaner. But yeah, it's a good machine though. I mean, it's like I said, it's a shame these got a bad rap, you know, due to the Series 1 Kohler lubrication issues and all. But that's how it goes sometimes, you know, with things. They just, you know, before something can be done about it, you know, an opinion's formed about it, and that companies will decide to discontinue something to kind of protect their image, you know. And I mean, you can't really blame them for that, I guess. You know, they got to do what they got to do to stay on top of things. And I mean, you know, I'm not saying that the 318, anything bad about it. I mean, I'd love to have a 318. I remember my granddad saying he would have liked to have gotten a 318. 'Cause the only reason was for the power steering, the reason that he wanted the 318. Because, you know, naturally, as he got older, these are a little stiff steering, these 317s without the power steering. You know, they're just, these engines, these old cast iron opposed twins are heavy. And if you look at the repower kits from the Briggs Vanguard and the Honda engines that they have to repower these with, are so much lighter weight. And, you know, those engines are cast aluminum and stuff like that. So, I mean, that just stands to reason. But because of that weight difference, I've heard people say that have repowered, you know, these, particularly models like 317 and others that did not have power steering, that how much easier it is to steer them if they went with the Vanguard or the Honda repower kit, because it's so much lighter of an engine. So a lot of the hard steering on these non-power steering tractors like this one here is because they're, you know, they're a bit nose heavy. But I mean, that's you know, that's cast iron versus cast aluminum engine. I mean, that's just how it is, you know. But I think I'm not gonna sit here and quote this, like, in other words, you know, like I know this exact number to be true. You know, like that I've weighed the engine myself. This is just something I read, you know, that these engines like this right here easily weigh over 200 pounds. Or right at 200 pounds, something or other like that. So that's a lot of weight. I mean, you know, right over the front wheels like that. And then, you know, these repower kits are weighing 60, 80 pounds, maybe tops. I mean, that's a big difference right there. I mean, you know, but anyway, this cast iron is heavy duty stuff, you know, that you're not likely to find anymore, you know, in an air-cooled engine. It's just not, it's not what they're doing now. But each thing has its advantages and disadvantages, you know, so it's all good. Go ahead and start it up here. Hopefully I can start it without choking. I had it running a while ago. It's pretty cold out here, but it should start right up. You can just see what I mean about how easy it starts up. I mean, it runs really good. Even though the mechanic told me probably the ignition components that I had on there before I replaced them were probably still good. He said just hang on to them. That was not actually the problem. That was you know, the reason it wasn't getting spark and all. It was actually some other, I call it an electrical gremlin in the PTO switch. It caused the wiring, you know, it messed that up. So you know, it's glad though we got to the bottom of it and got it back running though. Like I said, it's starting up easier and quicker now than it ever has, I can remember. Do an update on it. It's been a while. I had only made that one video on it and then never got around to making another video on it, unfortunately, before it. My dad, you know, he was borrowing it and it quit running, so but at least it stayed, you know, in the shed out of the weather all that time at his house. I was able to keep it protected that way, you know, from the elements until I could get back to working on it, trying to figure out what exactly went wrong, and then taking a while, but you know, now I've got it back running and all. And that's the way it happens sometimes with things, you know, you just, they get put on the back burner, projects like that, and luckily was able to come back to this one and get it back going again. I knew I wanted to do that. I just had to find the time and money to do it. hopefully, you know, there'll be other videos, possibly when it gets warmer weather, you know, you can do a mowing video with it and stuff like that. There's nothing to mow out here now. Grass is dead practically. Like I said, I want to do, you know, tire upgrade eventually on it, but I'm just happy to have it back running and all, and try and use it like it is right now for a little bit. Work towards doing those other things down the road. Stay tuned for more videos on it in the future, and thanks for watching.